Good day, everyone. My name's Sandy Honigsberg, and I'm going to be talking to you today about my 3 or 4 areas of expertise, which are performance and goals, followed by calibration, and following that, we'll get into compensation. If we talk about performance and goals, then the first major addition to the system is the fact that starting now, as you can see, it's phase 1, and it's defined as having limited configuration. You'll actually be able to do your performance forms via the mobile application. Now, I'm not quite sure why they're calling it limited configuration, because from what I can see, you can do ratings, comments for goals, development goals, and competencies. You can also do the signatures, and you can write forms and complete them as well. So I'm not quite sure what they think is missing, and that they think they need to send it with why they're calling it a limited configuration, but it's definitely there. And if you look here, you can see that basically you've got your entire performance form visible on the screen as you go along. So that will be a major advance for people who really live on their phones, who spend a lot of time on the road. The rest of the things having to do with performance today are more of a minor level, but they're still important. The first one here that you see has to do with ad hoc reporting. And you can see here that when you're doing ad hoc reporting, they've now incorporated into it the the locale or the language pack that the person has. So you can see that if you're developing a report, you can see which language you're developing that report in. If we go on to collaborative steps, anybody who has a collaborative step as part of their route map, there's 2 things here. The first one's more of a minor issue, and that is that they've tried to make the lockup message a little bit more informative. But the second point is actually far more important, and that is that if one of the people on the collaborative team has abandoned the form and left it there, the lockup period has been reduced to 60 minutes from the original 120 minutes. So you don't have to spend all your time running around looking for him. You know that within the hour, the system will be freed up unless he actually actively exits the form. Another thing, the control that they've added into the system is on ask for feedback. There's now added a form to the system whereby you can constrain the ask for feedback function to remain within the company itself. You can disable the external mail address to make sure that everything stays in-house. Another one, and this can be good for a lot of people where they do a lot of movement, a lot of forms have to be moved by the admin. Until now, when you use the CSV file to move forms on the mass routing function, you're only allowed to move, the system would only move the form one step, either forward or backwards. And now you can do this thing, you can run it right through to the completion step using an uploaded file. So that can be a big boon for admins who have to move a lot of forms. The other thing here, also on the same function, is that when you used to be that if you were using a group, once you identified something by format, by template, and you went to the group, you could pick out the ones out of the group that you wanted. But if you were using individual forms, you could only do them one at a time. And now they're allowing you to do multiple selections, even if you're not using the group option. So those would be nice things for the admin to work with. If we're talking about bug fixes now, the next few slides are going to be dealing with bug fixes, which means that by definition, it's entirely possible that there are things that we'll see here that you may never run into on a day-to-day basis. But for people who have been afflicted by these bugs, you'll be happy to know that they've been fixed. So if you look at here, the first one, you can see that again on a collaborative route map, user rules were being were disappearing when they were used when the forms were being rerouted. So they fixed that. People who print their PDF, who print via PDF, they want to print their performance form. If until now there was a problem with the section weight, even if the section weight had a none defined against it, it was still being printed out. And they were informed now that the permission is now taken effect, and you will no longer see the weight in the when you print the form. Okay, same thing down here. The signature section comment was causing certain pods to disappear off the form. They've fixed that as well. This is something that could cause a lot of operational grief, and that is if there were ways of progressing the form or moving the form from one step of the route map to the next by using the team overview. And if when you moved that and when you did that, it wasn't changing the goal state plan. All right, and that can cause major grief if the goal state was supposed to go to non-updatable anymore, to read only, and it didn't, then that could cause major grief. So that's been fixed. And this last thing here is for people who like to really express themselves during their comment blocks. There's a hard limit of 4,000 characters on a comments block. And it used to be until now, if somebody overran that limit, the system was simply truncated without any warning, and the next time the person entered the form, they'd find that the end of his comments had been chopped off. The system, the hard limit is still there. It's still capped at 4,000 characters, but the system will now warn the person so that it can go back and edit what he's doing or change it or maybe add the comment somewhere else. But at least you won't, the stuff won't be truncated without the person being made aware of that. Okay. Other things that we're talking about here had to do with the way the form layout was going. Okay, the others tab and the ratings would overlap with each other. That's been fixed. Due dates, when you did a mass update to the route map, due dates were disappearing. They've been reestablished. And finally, on a text area form, if people were entering line breaks or carriage return on the system, it wasn't being rendered properly. People weren't seeing it when they re-entered the system, and that's been fixed as well. Okay. Oh, and here's another classic one, which is that sometimes you'd have prompts that were on the form that ended up with the same color as the background, so they'd end up being totally camouflaged. They'd be there, but you wouldn't be able to find them. So they've now fixed that. So if you go with the theme manager, you can fix that up so that you no longer lose your prompts in the background. Okay, moving on to goal management. Functionally, I can tell you that there's not much nothing has changed in the goal management. The only thing we're talking about here is this list of items having to do specifically that have been part of the Fiori upgrade. All right, they're changing the user interface and what the thing looks like. And you can see here, this is one example out of that list of the spell checker where they've just basically fixed up the way it looks. Functionally, it hasn't changed. None of these items have changed, okay, functionally. But when you go into the system now, you will notice that things look different. No, it's not your eyes deceiving you. The system has, in fact, updated what these forms look like. Going into continuous performance management, that's where they've put, SuccessFactors, the product designers and the engineers have put a lot of work in there. And they're trying to they're trying to encourage people as much as is humanly possible to use continuous performance management to encourage an ongoing discussion between employees and their managers. And there's a reason for that, because I've seen on some of the applications, on some of the projects that I've been on, where goals will be defined at the beginning of the year in Q1, and the next time anyone will actually go back in and look at those goals will be Q1 the following year when the performance form gets rolled out. And continuous performance the idea is to keep almost like an ongoing diary of what you're doing and make it available to the manager as well. So that's that's what we're going to be talking about in just a moment. Let's talk about this first thing here, though, is they've streamlined it. If anybody's used continuous performance management, you'll remember that there used to be 4 items that you could choose from. There were activities, achievements, and topics and coaching. And I guess they've discovered that too many people were not using topics and coaching, so they've enabled a flag that says, okay, you can turn those things off, so we can limit continuous performance management to activities and achievements. Okay, so that's just an admin function. You can turn those 2 things off. But getting back to what I was talking about, the philosophy of how to use or how to bring, introduce and actually get the most bang out of continuous performance management, you'll notice that what they've done is they've allowed the admin to set a date function or a frequency function that says, okay, here, this is one example. You haven't created an achievement, okay? And it's saying you're an employee, and we're going to send you we're going to have the system generate a letter for you to remind you that, hey, you haven't logged anything. You haven't logged an achievement for yourself. It's been over 10 days. It could be every month. It could be whatever. The frequency is, something that you determine. But the point is, you want to get your people to log onto the system, and you want them to record both for themselves and for their managers that which they've been doing during the course of the year. Remember that when you're using continuous performance management, achievements, once you've logged them, and if they've been linked to the goal, will appear both on the goal and on the performance review form. So it's a good thing that if you've done something major in March and you want to make sure that your manager sees it next January when it comes time to do the evaluation, that you've actually recorded the thing by a continuous performance management. And here's another reminder that that tells the employee, hey, certain period of time has passed, open up the system and log on and record something. All right. And the same logic applies here for all of these different things that you can see. You can do it at the level of an activity. You haven't updated the status of anything. Manager, if the manager has one-on-one meetings that have been piling up and hasn't been dealing with them, then the manager would also get a notification. Okay. And these are the types of things that, again, where continuous performance management can help you and can help the individual employees record what they've been doing during the course of the year. So when you get around to the performance management cycle, you don't start sitting there and saying, okay, what have I been doing all year? Fixes, you can see here the activities. Okay, comments that are made. Again, it's a bug fix. You may never have seen it, but you can see here comments will now be attributed to the employee as opposed to the bug that would have happened before. Okay. Something that very likely will not affect anybody listening to this presentation, and that is TouchBase is being put to bed, or it's being put to rest. If you notice that the reason they're doing it is because, here you see down here, the decision to sunset was due to low utilization. So the odds are that anybody listening has probably never turned it on in the first place. If you have turned it on and you want to make sure that the stuff that you've got in there doesn't disappear on you, then I suggest you open up a ticket like it says here and try to deal with it. But like I said, for most people, the fact that the TouchBase is being sunset will probably not affect your life in any way, shape, or form. Calibration is our next subject, and the changes here, again, like the goal plan, are strictly not strictly at the visual level. The first change is at the visual level. You can see they're applying Fiori here as well. So the executive review, where you used to see the stack here about what the plan distribution was as opposed to actual distribution, that's been changed to this layout that you see over here. Okay. This isn't. I'm not going to comment as to whether or not it's a better layout or it's an inferior layout, but this is the way the system is moving. Okay, they're going to Fiori. It's not something you can change. This is simply the way it's going to look from here on out. The functional change that they've added, which can really be a powerful tool, is the ability to incorporate dynamic groups when you're building your calibration sessions. Anybody who's dealt with calibration sessions knows that when you want to populate it, the first level of a population is to allow the system to populate based on the hierarchy below the owner, so that the direct reports become the participants or the part of the judging panel, and the indirect reports on one level below them, they become the subjects for the calibration session. But in a lot of environments, that's simply too focused. It's the wrong group of people, and you end up having to pull people in at both levels, at the subject level and at the participant level, virtually one at a time. What the system is doing now is allowing you for both groups to use the dynamic groups to populate those sessions. So you can set it up using all the standard criteria that you want to use. So you can create a group based on some common denominator, such as location or any other or job or any other function that you have available to you within the group as a criteria, and you can use that to populate your calibration sessions. And that's something that I believe will be a very, very powerful tool for people to be able to use. Here's something here that will apply primarily to the American market. Not necessarily, but certainly, it's something that would appeal to the American market. It's almost like an extension of the equal opportunity, EEE, or the equal employment opportunity, where it talks about gender indicators. All right. If you're looking at, you want to break it down, the system, without actually mentioning it by name, will be able to give you stats on how your population in a calibration session breaks down as far as male, female, and as you can see in this particular case, others. So, okay, so that's something that, that again, it may or may not be relevant for you, but know that the functionality exists. If you have clients in the States, or if you have a local client with an operation in the States that's big enough to fall into the rules of EEO, then you may find that you have to actually invoke this functionality. Same thing here. It talks about photoless calibration session. Again, it's part of the same logic, and that is, that the system is very proud of the fact that at any point in time, you can look, when you're on a performance form, when you're looking through the org hierarchy, you can see who the people are, and that's usually considered an advantage. However, when you're doing calibration, then you may want to actually camouflage those people and just go with the name so that nobody can come back to you afterwards and say, you gave me a poor review based on the fact that you saw me and you didn't like me. So you have the ability now to hide the pictures. That's an option. And again, you can see where that comes from. May or may not be relevant for the environment that you're working in. Finally, I'll be finishing off with compensation. And within compensation, sorry, jump there. Okay. Compensation, the first point that you see here sort of harks back to the first point that we saw with performance, which is the use of local language on the ad hoc reports and the dashboards. You can see here they give an example for people working in Canada. In Quebec, by law, reports have to be produced in French, so you can guarantee that your reports are being pulled out in French. Okay. Here's another example at the level of at the dashboard level. Where if you look here on the left, if you can see here, you notice down here, like it talks about manager review, and over on the right, you've got the manager. I assume that means review in German. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but you can definitely see that the same dashboard there, the system knows to recognize the default locale that the user is in and pulls up the language pack that's relevant for it. Okay. The other thing here, and this is a really nice feature, is cross-domain reporting. They've expanded it, or they've expanded, if you're talking about database terms, they've expanded the foreign key that you're allowed to use so that you can now make a join between compensation and performance and goals. So if you look down here in the third bullet, you can see like a very nice report that you could pull, which you weren't able to pull until now, which is go from a compensation form and pull in both the new salary as well as the overall rating at the same time, as well as objective, competency, and ratings. Okay, and you can pull all that together in one report, which is something that you weren't able to do until now, and that's a really nice add-on. People that clients that are using global assignments, then you can see here if you look at the background here where the cursor is, you can see that's in the background there you've got the compensation worksheet. And as you know, on the compensation worksheet, you've got that link right there that opens up the quick card. If you click on the quick card, and if you're talking about an employee that has a global assignment, then you can now see the details of the global assignment. You don't have to go running around looking for it. So where is he working? What are his assignments? You can see it all directly through the compensation form. This is something. If you're using compensation statements, and you've got a lot of graphics in there, or you've customized it up to a certain level, you may find that the PDF generator doesn't render the forms properly. So you may see a form on the HTML looking one way, but when you open up the PDF, it looks like something entirely different. So what they've added into the system is a flag that says, okay, we know the PDF doesn't render properly. You can basically shut it off, so an employee doesn't have to end up printing something that doesn't look like what he thought he saw. Instead, you kill the PDF, and if the employee wants to print out his compensation statement, or if the manager wants to print it out, it doesn't really matter. You can, once you've opened it up using the HTML, you can see it via HTML. Then you can use the HTML printing function, which is available as well. You just have to go look for it. It's in the upper left-hand corner there, file print. Then you can print the statement as rendered, as opposed to what might be an improperly rendered PDF version. Data fixes, you can see here, the second one talks about where the system would time out if an upload file was too big. You've got this thing here as well. Okay, the user type, then the field name wasn't rendering properly, and they fixed that up as well. Okay. This is an important one. If people ever use an ampersand as part of the name of their compensation worksheet, okay, the ampersand would cause all sorts of grief because the system, recognize it as a reserved character. They've changed it now, so you're now allowed to create something like that, and the ampersand will render as an ampersand, and it won't give you all sorts of funny things in your template name. Okay, and this last thing here has to do would only happen if people had invoked field-based permissioning. Okay, FBP is field-based permissioning within compensation. If you don't know what it is, then I can tell you right now that what it is basically is it allows you to use rules at the level of individual columns on your compensation worksheet. And it says all of a sudden, the merit guideline column was suddenly appearing, and that's because there was a bug within the field-based permissioning. So it disappeared, and having fixed the bug, all of a sudden this thing is suddenly magically appearing, and you basically they've changed it, so they've fixed up the field-based permissioning, and you have to go in there and hide it if it suddenly magically appeared. For those people who work with right to left, if you're in Arabic or in Hebrew, then the SuccessFactors want you to know that they fixed most of the bugs having to do with reversing the direction of the form. So the forms that now work from right to left are working a lot better than they ever used to. They recognize that there are some bugs that still need fixing, and they're working on it, but I can tell you from personal experience that they've definitely gone a long way. Almost finished here, and that is people working with this particular admin interface, where you can see that whole salad of functions that are up there for administering the compensation process. There's a provisioning a provisioning switch, which you could have used, which reduces all of this down to these functions over here. It's much easier to work with. Basically, you'll find that 90% of everything you see up here exists via compensation home. And it's just an easier. You haven't lost any functionality, obviously, but it's certainly much easier to look at. And I'm just making you aware of the fact that when you look at it and you say, "Oh my God, where are all my functions?" The answer is they're all buried here within compensation home. And that'll happen, as you can see, next quarter if you haven't already done it in your own environment. At the same time, or at a later release date, you'll see that the old version of the compensation worksheet will be upgraded to the new version that you see here. Functionally, it's exactly the same. Actually, there may be one or two things here that they've added here that don't exist over here, but basically it's primarily look and feel, and the look and feel is what you can see in the bottom slide, and that again will happen automatically if you haven't done it already. And with that, I've concluded my section of the presentation. Wish you all a good day.